Usually free agency at the running back position isn't that big of a deal. However, this year, we have an incredibly weak 2024 running back draft class. So actually, you have teams that need running backs going after these guys such as Squan Barkley, Josh Jacobs, with more of an urgency, right? Because there's not the NFL draft coming around the corner to save them later on. We're going to go through our top 10 free agent running backs. Starting off at 10, I understand, yes, he is not necessarily a great player. He's not going to step into a future down role, but we will have Zach Moss here. Now, if you're looking at Zach Moss, this is a running back that way back in 2020 in Buffalo, maybe he did something right. I mean, he's out there averaging 37 rushing yards per game. The counting stats, never really too impressive for Zach Moss in Buffalo. He gets to Indy, and yes, he averages 56.5 rushing yards per game, which is nice. But more importantly, you actually see the flash of Zach Moss in the few games that you had with no Jonathan Taylor, where later in the season, you have Zach Moss coming out against the Baltimore Ravens with arguably the best defense in the NFL this season. He has 122 rushing yards. Against Tennessee, he has 165 rushing yards, multiple rushing touchdowns. Against Houston at the beginning of the season, you're seeing him go out there and have 88 rushing yards and the rushing TD. So across the board, you had the flashes with no Jonathan Taylor in Indy for Zach Moss. Now, do I expect Zach Moss to go over and find himself a landing spot where he is the solidified starting running back? No. What you're hoping for with Moss is that he goes over to a team like the New England Patriots, where maybe he has a slight role from a week-to-week perspective, where he is mixed in as a committee back, but obviously you were to have upside if the starter goes down in front of him, where you can see him actually command that full-blown workload. Should get paid. I mean, this past year, he was pretty much on the veteran minimum, getting paid $1 million. So I think that does go up just a bit for Zach Moss this season. Now, going over to our next guy, we are going to be looking at J.K. Dobbins. Dobbins has had a very sad NFL career so far. Going to 2020, this is a running back that leads the NFL in yards per carry. He averages only about 9 carries per game, but with those 9 carries, he averages 6.0 yards per carry. He's going out there, flashing the talent profile that you saw at Ohio State, flashing the athleticism that we have known from J.K. Dobbins since his time in high school. But 2021 misses the entire season. 2022, he plays 8 games. Then going into 2023, J.K. Dobbins, before the season kicks off, doesn't want to go to training camp, doesn't want to play in the preseason, and is saying, you know what? Give me a new contract. Give me a contract. I don't want to play without a deal in 2024. He ends up having to play because obviously he does not have much leverage in that situation. He plays, and in his first game, he has 8 carries and tears his Achilles. So with Dobbins, while 100%, if he was able to stay healthy, maybe, just maybe, he could have been a great running back in the NFL. Obviously, that did not happen. It is very difficult to assume now that J.K. Dobbins, when he's 26 years old, should be penciled in to be anything more than a backup with some upside with his next team. Hopefully, you do have the Baltimore Ravens bringing him back in. But going over to our next back here, I do want to highlight Devin Singletary. With Singletary, similar to Zach Moss, I mean, this is another running back that, of course, left Buffalo, and he had arguably his best season in Houston, where he sets his career high in rushing yards at 898 rushing yards. He comes out and doesn't get that involved as a receiver, which is a little bit frustrating, but nonetheless, definitely flashes, particularly at the end of the season as well for a Houston Texans team that went into the year with Devin Singletary as a backup. So ultimately, I don't necessarily think that you have Singletary going over to be a starting running back either, but this is a running back that's shown time and time again he will be able to handle the ball. He's not really going to make too many mistakes. He was only getting paid about $1.5 million this past season in Houston. I imagine this number is going to be a little bit higher, and he goes and signs as a committee back / backup in his next landing spot. Now, going over to what we have with our next running back, this is about when you actually find more upside. I want to go through and look at DeAndre Swift here. With DeAndre Swift, looked great early in the season. I mean, we wanted to sit here and say, okay, DeAndre Swift is that guy, blah, blah. Sadly, that didn't necessarily come through. Sadly, we're not sitting here and saying at the end of the season that DeAndre Swift for sure earned himself a starting job this next year. Tailed out down the stretch, very similar to the rest of the Philadelphia Eagles. If you are looking at Swift, what's interesting is, one, the Detroit Lions got rid of him for pretty much nothing. Two, if you're looking at his usage in Philadelphia, he was better as a rusher than he ever was in Detroit. But at the same time, you can say that the usage as a receiver dramatically came down. I mean, maybe with Swift, if he goes to a situation where they're actually going to involve him more so as that third down back that is a little bit more upside if the guy were to go down in front of him, I think that he could find a lot of success in that instance. Now, a running back that was thrust into the starting job finally, and it did not find any success, was Tony Pollard coming in here at 5. With Pollard, coming off a season in 2022, through 16 games, cracks 1,000 rushing yards with Ezekiel Elliott in Dallas. Zeke leaves. People are through the moon. What does he do the next year? Fewer rushing yards per game. Fewer receiving yards per game. Fewer touchdowns. Dramatically fewer touchdowns. They get cut in half. Tony Pollard simply does not look like he has any juice. This is also a running back that I understand seems like he should be young, right? I mean, this was his first shot at being a starter. Well, the man was 26 this past season. So going into this next year, it will be his age 27 season in the NFL. I could see him going and being a premium handcuff back, right? Where he goes to another team that maybe decides to deploy him in a committee, and with limited touches, if he's able to stay healthy, he can get back and be more so a dynamic running back yet again. I know this sounds crazy, but like if you were to have, say, Tony Pollard go over and join the Niners, I think that can make a lot of sense in that you only need to get him about 8 to 10 touches per game. Maybe you save Christian McCaffrey as CMC ages in that scenario, and it allows Tony Pollard to stay healthier overall. And of course, with Christian McCaffrey, if y'all want to check out his pick'em on Underdog Fantasy this week, you can find that link in the description in the comment section. Over there on Underdog, if you use promo code FLOCK, they're going to match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to $100. Plus, you'll get our Dynasty Fantasy Football rankings and a Christian McCaffrey special pick'em, more than less than half a total yard. Now, going over to our next running back, we will have Austin Ekeler in here at 4. With Ekeler, obviously, this past season, it was a train wreck. I mean, he goes from, in 2022, leading the NFL in rushing with over 1,600 yards to falling down to about 800 yards in 2023. Not to mention the receiving drop-off as well. Why I'm going to have Austin Ekeler still ahead of someone like Tony Pollard, even if Ekeler looked arguably just as bad, even if Ekeler looked arguably, older this past season, is this is a running back that as he transitions, you can imagine him late in his NFL career, more so just being that receiving down back. I think you could see Austin Ekeler finding a lot of success if you were to go over to a team maybe like, I don't know, the Houston Texans, right? And he's just going to exclusively be the third down back for the Houston Texans. I think that would be a natural fit. What's actually funny is if you go over and pull up the updated odds that you have right now of where Austin Ekeler will end up, you have the Chargers as the favorite. I think that should be the expectation. But really, they're not too likely to land him. They're at plus 350 right now, which gives them an implied odds of 22%. Then you have Baltimore, Philly, Denver, Chicago, the Jets, and the Texans. I'd imagine whoever's going to get Ekeler is going to be getting him on a discount, given the running back market, given what he just did this past season. But it is a little sad for Austin Ekeler, where you go over and you look at what you just had, say, with J.K. Dobbins, where Dobbins didn't want to play this season without a contract. That was the same case for Ekeler, and obviously he lost himself a lot of money for playing. Now, going over to our next running back, I actually had him behind Austin Ekeler initially, but then we really thought about it and was like, okay, no, we can't do that. We will have Derrick Henry. Now, with Derrick Henry, the main concern is that he is going to be 30 years old this next season. Derrick Henry came into the NFL way back in 2016. Derrick Henry stayed 4 years at Alabama. So Derrick Henry is a running back that typically should have seen his fall off 3 years ago. However, I was surprised to see that yet again, Henry leads the NFL in carries this past season. And if you're looking over the past 5 seasons, the NFL carry leader, starting off 2019, Derrick Henry. 2020, Derrick Henry. 2021, it was Jonathan Taylor. This was a season that Derrick Henry only played 8 games, and in those 8 games, he averaged 27 carries per game and had 219 carries. Derrick Henry was top 10 in the NFL in carries in 2021 in only 8 games. The man would have been number one if he stayed healthy. 2022, Derrick Henry. 2023, Derrick Henry. So even though the efficiencies dropped off, where this past season you're seeing him at a career low 4.2 yards per carry, you're seeing him at a recent low of 68 rushing yards per game, 16.5 carries per game. He's still near the top of the league. You should definitely not expect to get prime Derrick Henry, even if he finds himself in a better situation, but he still can be a starting running back at this point of his NFL career. If you're looking at the updated odds of where Derrick Henry may find himself, you have New England as the number 1 team. Then behind that, Cincinnati, then the Raiders, Giants, Titans, Ravens, Jets, Vikings, Texans. I think a lot of people want Miami. I think that Baltimore makes a lot of sense. And I know Cincinnati seems weird with Joe Mixon being there, but we will go to our cut candidates in just one bit where you'll see maybe Mixon's not guaranteed to be there. Now let's go over to our second most appealing running back, and this is going to be Josh Jacobs. Now, if you pull up the most recent report that you have from Bleacher Report regarding Josh Jacobs and his injury at the end of the year, sounds like it wasn't that big of a deal. He was a game-time decision for the very last week, but you understand if you're Josh Jacobs, I'm not going out there. I don't have a contract in 2024. I mean, our team really has no shot at a Super Bowl or anything of the sorts. So yeah, it makes sense for Josh Jacobs to shut down his season a little bit early. He's going to get paid this offseason regardless. They can't really franchise tag him. And if you're looking at what Jacobs did this past season, I mean, definitely a step back from what we had 2 years ago, right? Where 2 years ago, Jacobs leads the NFL in rushing. He has 97 rushing yards per game. But with that being said, I mean, this is a running back that is only going to be 26 this next year. So if you're looking at Austin Eckler is about to be 29. You're looking at Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry's 30. Tony Pollard's 27. I mean, you actually have Josh Jacobs as a running back that's had a ton of success, has led the NFL in rushing, while at the same time is going to be a little bit younger or a lot younger than the majority of the other running backs on this list. Now, clearly the number 1 running back in free agency this offseason is going to be the same guy that had struggles last offseason. You have Squan Barkley for the New York Giants. Barkley wasn't able to stay healthy through the entire year. He was very low with his yards per carry, down there at 3.9. I understand, yes, the stats. It doesn't matter if we're just going to be looking at box score stats. Obviously, this is an offense that just fell apart. Squan Barkley never had a shot. This is a running back that still has big play potential. They can still lean on him. And right now, this is a running back that is most likely going back to the New York Giants. They are number 1 with the probability of landing him. Then you have Tennessee, Cincinnati, Philadelphia, the Raiders, the Bucks, the Vikings. I mean, I think that you can find a couple different landing spots here to make a lot of sense. I think the Vikings would make a ton of sense if they bring Kirk Cousins back. I think the Cincinnati Bengals make a lot of sense if somehow they can make the money work. Obviously, with that Joe Burrow contract, with the Chase Higgins contracts coming up, that's going to be very difficult. But maybe he just finds himself back as a New York Giant. Just considering the fact that this is going to be a weak draft class, I think a lot of these running backs actually get paid this offseason in comparison to what we've historically seen. Now, I do want to bring up some older running backs that are coming to the end of their contracts that are either going to be free agents in 2025 or potential cut candidates. Now, our first guy, I'm not saying he's going to get cut. Nick Chubb will be someone to monitor, though, based off his rehab. This is a running back that they could save about $12 million if they decided to move on from him. So I don't want to come out here and say, oh yeah, no, Nick Chubb's not. Now, of course, Nick Chubb's probably Cleveland Brown next season, but will be someone to monitor. Aaron Jones was a running back that previously, I mean, you were looking at the beginning of the season saying, okay, does this guy have any juice left? He's going to be 30 years old in 2024. I think the playoff game honestly saved him. Where you are looking at Aaron Jones, they could only save $5 million from moving on from him. So given the fact that they'd have to go out there and they'd have to give that $5 million to just a new running back, Aaron Jones probably is going to be a Green Bay Packer next season. Alvin Kamara's contract is interesting because if you are looking at Kamara, he's tied up this season kind of where he has $17 million in the dead cap. But if they were to move on from him, they could essentially save $40 million over the next 2 years. He has an $18 million cap hit this season, a $30 million cap hit next season. So no matter what, Alvin Kamara will be a free agent in 2025. He is not going to be playing for the New Orleans Saints for $30 million. I don't care how good of a season he has this year. And there is that outside chance based off how bad the cap situation is for New Orleans that this is a player that we're going to have to monitor. James Conner is a running back that, I think is probably safe, right? I mean, they could go through, they can move on from him and save about $5.5 million. He has $3 million on the dead cap. James Conner will be someone to monitor. And then as you saw with those updated Vegas odds where, hell, sports books are saying the Bengals may land Squan Barkley. They're saying the Bengals may land Austin Eckler. They're saying the Bengals may land Derrick Henry. You will see Joe Mixon as a potential cap casualty. This is a running back that's owed about $9 million. He has about 2.5 on the dead cap, so they could save about $6 million if they decided to move on from Joe Mixon. Not necessarily guaranteed, but will be something to monitor through the offseason. But I think that's all I have for y'all. Really hope y'all enjoyed this video. If you did, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you play fantasy football. And if you wanted to check out that Christian McCaffrey special pick'em for the game this Sunday, you can find that link to Underdog Fantasy both in the comment section as well as the description. Promo code FLOCK will get you 100% deposit match plus our Dynasty Fantasy Football rankings. But I think that's all I got for you. Really do appreciate you. Really hope we get to see you out with the next video.